The morning began like any other. As I stood there shaving, Deanna managed to whip up some coffee and toast. She filled me in on the latest misfortune of my friend Inna, who had been abandoned by yet another husband. I'd honestly lost count of how many. Deanna also mentioned that she would be running late today because she planned to visit her sick mother after work. I listened half-heartedly, preoccupied with my own concerns. It was going to be a busy day ahead with 2 crucial client meetings that had the potential to transform my business. Yura, are you even listening to me? Diana's spoon tapped impatiently against her coffee cup, demanding my attention. Of course, honey. Your mom's sick, and you'll be late tonight, I replied, mustering a strained smile. I might even have to spend the night at her place, Deanna said, attempting a mournful expression. I've been really worried about her health lately. Well, you've never shown much concern for my mom's problems either, she added, giving me a defiant look. And she was absolutely right. My wife's mother was like a venomous snake. Throughout our 11 years together, I had made every effort to keep my distance from my mother-in-law. Interacting with Jana Petrovna was only justifiable when we needed her saliva for a home remedy. Using it as a substitute for snake venom to treat sciatica, I nearly said hemorrhoids. Thankfully, she didn't desire to be involved in our family affairs either, limiting her interactions mainly to her daughter and grandchildren. Well, anyway, did you get it all? Deanna asked as she stirred her coffee with her spoon. I got it. I took the kids and fed them dinner without waiting for you, I replied, getting up and wiping my lips with a napkin. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Say hi to your mom for me. I kissed my wife on the cheek, giving her a few extra pecks, said goodbye to the kids, and grabbed my briefcase before leaving the apartment. To be honest, I had started to feel anxious about my mother-in-law's chronic illness. At only 52 years old, her health was rapidly deteriorating. Although my wife spent more and more nights at her mother's, she never went into detail about her condition. I wasn't particularly interested, so I didn't pay much attention to what my wife said this time. I figured it would be just another night. If she needed anything, she could always call me back. Autumn arrived early this year. By early October, a chilly north wind began to blow, signaling the end of warmth. The cold gusts brought along rain, not the heavy downpours of summer that quickly passed with thunder and lightning. Instead, it was a fine, relentless, freezing rain that seemed to never cease. Within moments, the sidewalks were covered with a yellow carpet of fallen leaves. The incessant rain darkened them and made them treacherous underfoot. The wind attempted to sweep them off the pavement, tugging at their tattered edges, but the fallen leaves clung on as if holding onto the remnants of summer with their last bit of strength. The rain gave way to frost, transforming the puddles into icy pools. In the midst of this wintry scene, the faint autumn sun cast an unsteady, uneasy glow. Observing its feeble light, one yearned for the swift arrival of nightfall. Yet darkness did not bring solace either. Reluctantly, the street lamps bathed the nocturnal streets in a flickering, liquid radiance, deepening my sense of melancholy and despair. I was employed in a small antique firm that not only specialized in selling rare items, but also offered appraisal and evaluation services, particularly for antique jewelry. To be candid, this firm was my own creation. Apart from myself, there were 7 other individuals on the team, including my secretary and 3 salesmen who manned our modest antique store on the building's ground floor. Today held immense significance as I was scheduled to meet 2 crucial clients whose decisions could greatly impact my income, either positively or negatively. The city's largest bank had expressed interest in investing in a contemporary art gallery, seeking expert guidance for this long-term venture. The prospect of securing a collaboration agreement to provide advisory services deeply intrigued me. Equally significant was the second meeting. Less than a month ago, a renowned antique collector had passed away, leaving behind an inheritance that his heir, who lacked a comparable passion, intended to sell. However, before proceeding, he desired a comprehensive appraisal of the collection's true value. Given his limited knowledge in the realm of antiques, he reached out to me and requested an assessment with the potential for subsequent purchase. The stakes were high, as the value at hand amounted to several 100,000 green rubles. Thus, the outcome rested solely in my hands. In the morning, I received a call from the editor of the publishing house, where my first monograph on jewelry stamps of Imperial Russia and the Soviet Union was scheduled to be published. Understanding this subject matter was crucial in the antiquarian business, and my expertise in the field allowed me to compile public information and incorporate my personal experiences into a book that would assist specialists and collectors in navigating the world of jewelry marks. The process was arduous and time-consuming, but it proved to be immensely worthwhile. The publication of this book not only bolstered my personal reputation, but also established my company as a reputable entity among specialists and antique collectors. This held significant value, both literally and metaphorically. Immersed in my work, I barely noticed the passing of the day. Everything progressed smoothly. I finalized the contract, the consultation went well, and the heirs of the collection agreed to sell it to my company. The publishing house presented me with a preliminary copy of the monograph for my revisions, assuring me that the book would be published within a month. After picking up my children from school, I made my way home. As I prepared dinner, Deanna called me multiple times, expressing concern for our well-being. She had stayed at her mother's due to her elevated blood pressure, fearing she might need to call an ambulance. Finally, with everyone fed and settled, I poured myself a glass of cognac and sat down to edit my book. Antique jewelry and products often bear an antique stamp indicating their authenticity, which is measured in zlotniks. In the old Russian measurement system, a zlotnik represented a weight equal to 196 pound. This system was used to determine the gold and silver content in alloys during the Russian Empire and Soviet Russia, spanning over 2 centuries from 1711 to 1927. The number of gold pieces, with a maximum of 96, determined the amount of gold or silver in the alloy. For gold, various assays were established, including 36, 56, 72, 82, 92, and 94 gold pieces. Similarly, silver had assays such as 72, 74, 82, 84, 87, 88, 90, 91, and 95 gold pieces. These assays indicated the quality of the alloy, specifically the proportion of silver or gold in 96 units. For example, a 56 gold hallmark meant that out of 96 parts of the alloy, 56 parts were gold, while the remaining 40 parts were additives known as ligature. Pure metal without any additives corresponded to 96 parts of gold, which is equivalent to today's 999 hallmark or 24-karat gold. The most common gold grade in modern times is 585, which corresponds to 56 carats in the gold leaf system. The presence of gold in the alloy determines the price of the product, along with the craftsmanship involved. Although it may seem mundane, this information holds value for both antique enthusiasts and experts. Gradually, exhaustion caught up with me, and I eventually fell asleep at the table. In my dream, images of assay spoonfuls danced around my head, forming circles. The next morning, Deanna arrived and hurriedly headed to the shower. Amidst the sound of running water, she began telling me something about my mother and the fate of another feminist friend, until she encountered her first man. I prepared a pot of coffee and cooked scrambled eggs, patiently waiting for the kids to finish their breakfast before sending them off to school. Today, I had decided to delay my own work and head to the office around 10 o'clock. Little did I know, that decision would come back to haunt me as it triggered a terrible headache. Diana, my wife, didn't stay for long that morning. After delivering her monologue and finishing her coffee, she hurriedly left for work, assuring me that she would be punctual today. Deanna was a stunning woman, blessed with long legs, captivating green eyes and flowing blonde hair. In contrast, I considered myself more modest, a tall man with blue eyes, brown hair, and graying temples, bearing a scar on my left cheek from my time in the military. Ah, the memories of my service days. We were both 34 years old and had been together for 11 years, raising our 2 children, Pavel and Kostya, aged 10 and 8 respectively. You already know what I do for a living, but let me share a bit about Diana's profession. She worked at a beauty salon, specializing in manicures, pedicures, and haircuts. Despite holding a higher education degree in refrigeration and equipment from the University of Technology, Diana found true passion in her work at the salon. Immediately after graduating, she enrolled in a hairdressing course, and through her friends' connections, she quickly built a substantial clientele. You know how it goes. Networking is everything. I was never the jealous type, and Diana had never given me any reason to doubt her faithfulness. Living in a bustling city, secrets are hard to keep hidden for long. Eventually, the truth always comes to light. Yet, I firmly believed that my wife was above reproach, just like Caesar's wife. If anything were amiss, I would surely know. Oh, how foolish and arrogant I was. Now I see the error in my thinking, realizing that adultery can reside within the nature of any individual, regardless of gender. In the pursuit of new and thrilling experiences, one may become blinded to the consequences and stop at nothing to satisfy their desires. It is a human condition, not limited to women alone. While it is true that emotions and passions often govern many women's lives, engulfing them in the whirlwind of love, it would be unjust to generalize and disregard their commitments to their husbands, children, and conscience. It is not a chimera, as I once believed. It is a complex tapestry of existence where multiple aspects intertwine, and I am just one part of it. Financially, our family was in a comfortable position, and Diana didn't need to work. However, she chose not to sit at home and resumed working after her maternity leave ended. Once a year, we would go on a family trip to the sea. Personally, I preferred to avoid the overcrowded resorts of Turkey and Egypt, with their swarming crowds and predominantly male atmosphere. Instead, we opted for destinations like the Baltics and the Black Sea. In terms of our intimate life, things were going well. It seemed that Diana was content with the sweet side of our family life. Always and everywhere was my motto when it came to intimacy, and my wife never expressed any dissatisfaction. I was open-minded and willing to go along with any experiments or suggestions she had. However, everything changed recently. About 6 months ago, Diana's mother fell ill, and she dedicated herself entirely to her care. Constantly tending to her suffering mother-in-law, Diana's frequent nights at her bedside took a toll on our relationship. Outwardly, everything seemed the same, but I could sense a weary sadness in my wife's affectionate gestures whenever I declined intimacy. Well, you know, I'm so exhausted from work and taking care of Mom. Please wait, my love, not now, she would say with a soft touch on my cheek. Not now became the mantra of our married life, extending beyond just sex to include everything from vacations to other activities. Diana's commitment to her mother's well-being grew stronger, and she spent more and more time with her, often surpassing the time spent with me and our children. It was a deep motherly love that fueled her devotion. That's just how she was with Mom. The morning didn't start off well for me that day. As I arrived at work, I realized that I had left the bathroom light on at home. It wasn't a significant issue, but I decided to call my wife and ask her to check on it. However, neither at home nor on my cell phone could I reach her. Just as I was contemplating going back home, a call from a client came in, and I had to attend to it. Yuri Vitalievich, my dear, this is Mezentsev Nikolai Andreevich calling you. Could you please come over and take a look at something for me? I've been offered a platinum ring from the mid-19th century, but I have doubts about its authenticity. I am willing to compensate you generously for your consultation. The man who spoke possessed an enchanting baritone that captivated those around him, especially the opposite gender. Mizentsev. That name struck a chord in my memory. Then it hit me. He was a wealthy patron of the arts, spending summers at home and winters in Spain. He owned several newspapers and had investments in the oil business. It seemed he had decided to venture into the realm of antiques. Well, if he had the means, then we would go to him. All right, I could be there at 6:00 p.m. Please text me your address, I replied. Great, I'll have the salesman join us by that time as well. Until then, Mizentsev hung up. I tried dialing my wife's number again, but to no avail. She was either sound asleep or had gone to her mother's place again. Mezentsev's residence was located in an exclusive cottage community, 30 kilometers away from the city. His mansion exuded opulence, evident even from a distance. As I walked along the tiled path, I pushed open the heavy front door. Mezentsev, a well-groomed playboy in his mid-40s, wearing a bathrobe that barely covered his bare chest, greeted me at the threshold. His attitude suggested that he considered it a great favor to share the same air as me. Please, Yuri Vitalievich, he greeted me with a strained smile, his face showing signs of difficulty. Let's head up to the second floor to my office. We ascended the elegant marble stairs and found ourselves in a spacious hallway adorned with several doors. One of them led to the owner's office, while the others appeared to be bedrooms. Before we could exchange even a few obligatory pleasantries, the owner's cell phone chimed, interrupting our conversation. He covered the receiver with his hand and nodded in my direction. "Excuse me for a moment, Yuri Vitalievich," he said. "I have to attend to this call. I'll be right back." Leaving the door ajar, Mezentsev swiftly descended the staircase to take the call, leaving me momentarily alone. I took the opportunity to make another call to my wife, growing increasingly anxious about her sudden disappearance. Once again, the room filled with a prolonged ringing, followed by the unmistakable melody that I knew so well. Slowly, I realized that it was my wife's phone that had answered the call. The sound emanated from the room closest to me. Making my way to the hallway, I cautiously turned the doorknob and peered into the bedroom. Inside, an untidy, oversized bed stood beneath a canopy of flowing blue silk. Resting on the bedside table was a phone, its screen glowing brightly. It must have accidentally fallen there. I stood frozen for a few moments, unsure of what to think or how to react. My heart raced, alternating between pounding in my throat and sinking into my stomach. Bending down, I picked up the phone. On the illuminated screen, I saw my own face along with the word "beloved" as the signature. There was no mistaking it. It was Diane's phone. Disconnecting the call, I slipped it into my pocket. My gaze shifted to the bed, and beneath a pillow, I noticed the delicate straps of a pink bra peeking out. Carefully tugging at one, I found myself holding my wife's intricately designed lace bra, the very one we had bought together just a month ago. I discreetly stashed it away in the inner pocket of my jacket and swiftly made my way back to my office. A few minutes later, the owner of the house entered, accompanied by a skinny, unremarkable man. He introduced us as Mikhail Viktorovich and Yuri Vitalievich, respectively, without any hesitation. The guest wasted no time in producing an antique Moroccan case and handed it over to me, visibly attempting to steady his trembling hands. With utmost care, I opened the lid and beheld a magnificent platinum ring adorned with a ruby, a true work of art from the mid-19th century, crafted by an anonymous Russian goldsmith. I examined it closely under a magnifying glass, studying the intricate engravings and the mesmerizing play of light within the blood-red stone. There was no doubt about its authenticity. This ring had a rich history. I composed an appraisal, handed it to Mezentsev, received my fee, and made a hasty exit. I couldn't bear to remain in that house any longer. I wondered if Mezentsev had any inkling that I was the husband of his mistress. As for Deanna, my doubts had vanished. She was undeniably his mistress. Oh, the effort it took to maintain a facade of composure. How I longed to strike his pampered face. Fortunately, my military training still served me well. As I sat motionless in the car for what felt like an eternity, the reality sank in. Deanna had spent her evenings and nights for the past 6 months in someone else's bed, and her mother-in-law had been diligently covering up her daughter's indiscretions. A rush of memories flooded my mind, our entire lives flashing before my eyes. In that moment, despair threatened to consume me. Why would she do this to me? Why? If I could, I would have screamed in agony. But I knew I had to gather myself. I needed to figure out what to do next. Okay, I'll go home and confront this head-on. Making a decisive turn, I drove off. Soon, I found myself on the highway, heading towards the brightly lit advertisements of the bustling city. I've never been lucky with women. Sooner or later, they always leave me. Abandoned by my mother when I was just a child, she ran off to be with her lover, leaving no room for me in her supposedly blissful future. And now, my wife has followed suit. After 11 years of marriage, it seems she has decided to make a drastic change, starting anew. What is it about me that drives women away? It took 20 years before I finally met my mother again, 2 decades after she escaped into a different life. The encounter left a profound impact on me. I fought back tears, refusing to break down like a young boy. No amount of separation could make me forget her voice, the scent of her hair, or the warmth of her hands. How could she leave her 5-year-old child and not think of him once during all those years? Did I forgive her? Honestly, I couldn't answer that question myself. One thing was certain though, I still loved her, just as I had 20 years ago. There was nothing I could do to change that. My father, after my mother's departure, never remarried. He loved me deeply and feared that no stepmother could ever replace my mother. No woman wants to take on another man's children. And besides, women don't owe anyone anything. It's a man's responsibility to raise and support children who are not his own. The saying goes, the father is not the one who conceives, but the one who raises. But that doesn't apply to women. That's how our lives unfolded. 2 men abandoned by the woman we once loved. Then, tragically, my father passed away, and I found myself moving in with my grandparents. It was an odd situation, being considered an orphan despite having a living mother. Society often points fingers at men, accusing them of being excessively cruel. But I find such claims to be baseless. In reality, women can be relentless in their pursuit of personal happiness, often leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They will stop at nothing, even at the expense of their own children. It's a harsh truth, but it seems that women possess a greater capacity for cruelty and deceit. What did Diana lack? Love, affection, financial security, excitement? Throughout our 11 years together, I never once glanced at another woman. Perhaps I should have. Did she interpret my unwavering love as a weakness, convincing herself that I would never leave her? Maybe Deanna never truly loved me. It doesn't feel that way. We shared a deep connection all those years, and I believe I would have sensed any falseness in her. My heart would have known. Until today, I never saw any signs of infidelity from my wife. Everything seemed perfect, which made the discovery all the more devastating. What a fool I was. Deanna had been cheating for nearly 6 months, betraying our vows while pretending that everything was fine. The morning conversations, the care she showed towards the children and me, none of it was genuine. It was all a lie. I was reminded of the words of an outspoken acquaintance of mine, a husband is a potential enemy. Did women truly hold such beliefs? And if so, did they act upon them, even in the most intimate moments with their partners? The outcome was clear for me. I found myself feeling uneasy and repulsed by Diana's presence. A cheating woman is like an ashtray. It may appear clean, but you know that someone has stubbed out their cigarettes in it. There was one more thing. Strangely, I remained oddly calm in the face of what had transpired. Perhaps the full weight of the horror hadn't settled in yet. For now, I was trapped in a state of numbness, as if I were a spectator watching events unfold from the sidelines. Upon returning home, Deanna was not there as she had promised. It struck me as odd, since she had assured me she would be home early today. In the morning, she had mentioned her mother-in-law picking up the kids from school, setting the stage for an intimate evening for just the two of us. But the mere thought of it sent a shiver down my spine. It appeared that languid evenings together were a thing of the past, at least for the foreseeable future. I entered the kitchen, retrieving an empty cognac bottle from the cabinet and placing it on the table. However, I resisted the urge to drink and instead decided to have a sincere conversation with my wife while remaining sober. Shortly after, Deanna arrived, nearly at 11 o'clock in the evening. "Yura, I'm sorry," she began, her voice filled with her usual rambling nature. "Vicky, as always, is dealing with problems in her marriage, and I had to be there to console her. I wanted to call her, but I seem to have misplaced my phone. It's probably at my mother's place." She proceeded to remove her coat and boots in the hallway. "Have you eaten yet? I can make something," she offered, stepping into the kitchen and placing a bag of groceries on the stool. "Oh, cognac. Could you pour me a glass? I've had such an exhausting day, it's unbelievable." I nodded in understanding. Not every man could handle the challenges she faced, the constant strain of work, kids, husband, and lover. Silently, I observed Diana, contemplating how she would navigate this situation. Would she confess to her affair or continue pretending nothing was amiss? "I'm going to take a shower. Could you peel some potatoes?" she hurriedly requested, almost sprinting towards the bathroom. It became evident that she hadn't visited anyone named Vicky today. It was peculiar that her lover seemingly lacked a bathroom, forcing Diana to forego a shower. Could it be a peculiar fetish or a means to wash away her sins in the comfort of our own home? Deanna's words were muffled by the rushing water, rendering them incomprehensible. But I no longer cared about what she had to say. What mattered to me was expressing my own thoughts. As my wife entered the kitchen, clad in a loosely draped robe and a towel wrapped around her head, she immediately addressed the task at hand. She switched on the stove and grabbed a frying pan. "Did you peel the potatoes?" she asked, not acknowledging the turmoil brewing within me. "We're going to fry them and make some eggs." I couldn't ignore the situation any longer. "Don't just sit there," I responded, trying to maintain composure. "Cut the bread and sausage." Deanna continued to go about her kitchen duties as if nothing had happened. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that it was just another ordinary evening, one among countless others. But that illusion quickly faded. "Deanna, leave the frying pan," I urged, my efforts to remain calm straining. "Sit down, we need to talk." I couldn't help but notice the familiar pattern that conversations about infidelity often followed. The phrase "we need to talk" marked the beginning, regardless of whether it was initiated by the husband or the wife. It signified the need to explain oneself. Diana seemed surprised by my request, but she complied, leaving the frying pan untouched. "Can't we eat first?" she asked tentatively, avoiding eye contact. "Not now, if you still have an appetite," I replied firmly, my determination unyielding. Deanna's evasion tactics were transparent. She had guessed the topic of our discussion and was attempting to delay it. I saw through her ploy. "We'll eat later," I insisted. "Deanna, are you seeing someone?" Her face contorted in surprise as she countered. "What do you mean?" I immediately recognized her attempt to dismiss my suspicions, but I couldn't allow myself to be fooled. "I meant a lover. Do you have a lover? How long have you been deceiving me?" I struggled to hold back my tears as I confronted my partner. "Yura, what on earth are you talking about? A lover? Cheating? My goodness, you've completely lost it." My wife's outrage knew no bounds. She exuded an air of innocence, her face betraying no hint of guilt or deception. "Deanna, please don't play dumb. I know everything. How long has it been going on, and with whom? And did you even bother to find a phone number? Maybe we should call Mama?" I said, my frustration and hurt seeping into my words. My wife fell silent, visibly gathering her thoughts. "You really shouldn't be so absent-minded. It's important to double-check if you've forgotten anything," I remarked, placing her phone on the kitchen table. Diana's pupils dilated and she instinctively covered her mouth with her hand. "Where did you find it?" she whispered, barely audible. "I found it in Nikolai Andreevich's bedroom. I wonder what endearing nickname you have for him. Bunny, Pupsik, or Nicholas?" I openly taunted her. "Yura, you've misunderstood everything. Yes, I was at his place, but it was for work. I was giving him a manicure." Diana's voice quivered, on the verge of tears. She didn't even bother asking which Nikolai Andreevich I was referring to. It seemed she already knew. "In his bedroom, in his bed?" "I admit it. And did you use your breasts for the massage?" I sneered, unable to contain my anger. "What breasts? What nonsense are you spouting?" Diane's voice had turned into a scream. She must have regained her composure after the initial shock. Silently, I placed the pink bra with laces on the table, letting it speak for itself. Deanna sat in silence, her mind racing as she desperately searched for an excuse. I was feeling hot, so I decided to change into a robe and take off my bra, she stammered. "You know how uncomfortable it can be, especially when breasts sweat in a bra. You men just don't understand." "So it turned into a striptease then?" I chuckled, though my laughter didn't quite reach my highs. Diana flinched as if struck, realizing her excuse had failed. "Yura, I love only you. I don't need anyone else," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I don't know what you think you saw, but I'm telling you the truth. We have 2 children together. There's no lover, no adultery." Deanna dropped to her knees before me, desperation in her eyes. "My darling, please believe me. I haven't done anything wrong to you. You're the only man in my life." Diana's voice cracked as tears streamed down her cheeks. She grasped my hand and began to kiss it, pouring her heart out. Her love and tenderness were undeniable, making it almost impossible not to forgive her. What can I say? Tears are powerful weapons. We men are often emotionally vulnerable compared to women. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to embrace Deanna, to kiss her teary eyes, and to soothe her. After all, what the hell was I thinking? What kind of betrayal was I suspecting? She had only been at work, so what if she dropped her phone? It happens to everyone, right? And the bra, well, that's insignificant. Yes, I would have forgiven her if it weren't for the familiar antique platinum ring, adorned with a blood-red ruby on her right ring finger, a ring that replaced her wedding band. I sat there, listening to Diana's heart-wrenching pleas, noticing a shift in the tone of her voice. The hysterical notes began to fade, and it seemed as if my wife was starting to calm down. I wondered what had changed. Did Diana interpret my silence as a sign of reconciliation? Or did she genuinely believe she could convince me of her faithfulness? It's a well-known fact that women consider men a peculiar species, to be observed closely and molded to their liking. The key is to avoid being bitten along with the sugar cube. I chuckled inwardly at the irony of it all, but at that moment, I sat there dumbfounded, finally grasping the gravity of the situation unfolding before me. Deanna fell silent at last, her gaze fixed on me as if expecting me to seek solace in her arms. But what could I expect from someone so heartless, who had been cheating on me for nearly 6 months without my knowledge? She made an attempt to embrace me, but I instinctively pulled away. I seized her right hand, eyeing the ring on her finger suspiciously. "Where did you get this ring?" I asked, my voice laced with accusation. Deanna appeared perplexed, her eyes betraying her unease. "The ring?" she stammered. "Oh, it was just a suggestion from a friend." I tried it on and decided to wear it for a while, to see if it suited me or I had heard enough. The realization that our relationship was irreparable had dawned upon her, and she desperately clung to feeble words. I interrupted her. "Enough," I said sternly. "I think it's best if you leave now. I'll handle the divorce proceedings myself. We can discuss the children tomorrow." I rose from my seat, determined to bring this painful charade to an end. My wife sank down, defeated, and silently made her way to get dressed. She attempted to speak to me several times, but I remained resolute in my silence. As she reached the door, she turned towards me. "Yura, please don't drive me away," she pleaded, her voice filled with desperation. "Don't make a decision you'll regret later. I love you." Silently, I closed the door behind her. When you love someone, no one else should be necessary. Absolutely no one. And if anyone else enters the equation, it signifies the end of us and everything we shared. There comes a point where you no longer desire to live, yet lack the motivation to end it all. I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of brandy before settling down across from the window. The familiar sight greeted me, the yard, illuminated by a dim, flickering streetlight. Darkness enveloped the streets, and even the shower seemed to embody the gloom. My heart ached, and a searing pain surged through my body, reaching even my fingertips. A month had passed, and Diana and I existed on separate planes. She had taken the children to stay with her mother, while her lover embarked on a solo winter retreat in Spain. I had lost interest in Diana's whereabouts and her current life. We had been given a 2-month period to reconcile, but I found myself eagerly awaiting the deadline, longing to put an end to my family life. During this time, I actively avoided any interactions with women, detaching myself from dating. Surprisingly, once I separated from Diana, I became an enviable prospect for potential partners. How ironic! I realized that by not actively seeking out women, I became attractive to them instead. Money and success seemed to attract companions naturally. My book had been published, and I received an invitation to its presentation in Moscow. The event introduced me to valuable connections within the world of antiques. I marveled at how easily I had immersed myself in this exclusive sphere. The first edition of my book sold out quickly, prompting the publisher to prepare a second edition. Consequently, I received a substantial fee. The advantages of bachelor life. I could do as I pleased, be with whomever I desired, and answer to no one. However, on some evenings, an overwhelming longing gripped me, almost compelling me to howl. Love, like an embedded tooth, cannot be easily extracted. Only the heart can truly understand its depth. I still saw my sons on weekends. My mother-in-law kindly brought them to me, sparing Diana from unnecessary worry. Although I didn't have any extensive conversations with Zhana Viktorovna, it was evident that she carried immense concern for her daughter. It felt strange to me. I couldn't help but think that she believed our marriage had been a mistake, and at best, had mixed feelings about me. In the evenings, I would drop the children off at my mother-in-law's doorstep, and they would make their way to her apartment. Diana didn't hinder my visits with the kids. Work became my refuge, consuming my thoughts. Things were progressing well. We successfully organized 2 art exhibitions and provided consultations to private collectors. My company had gained a reputation of trust and expertise, attracting both amateurs and professionals seeking our services. The pinnacle of my career came with an invitation to the prestigious Christie's auction to examine antique gold pendants crafted by a Russian master. Sometimes, I would work late into the night and even spend a few nights at my office. To be honest, I was weary. One weekend, I decided to take a drive through the remote areas of the Vitebsk region, not really having a destination in mind. It was a spontaneous trip to unwind and clear my mind. Initially, I thought about bringing the children along, but I reconsidered, realizing that a long journey might prove challenging for them. So I left them at home, hoping they would be fine. I made the decision to explore these locations in search of abandoned villages and venture into their deserted houses. It was an intriguing endeavor, as one could stumble upon remarkable cultural artifacts with both historical and monetary value. Collecting and investing in antiques has become a trendy pursuit nowadays, with the potential to sell items that were deemed worthless just yesterday. Hence, I saw an opportunity to combine my interests with a profitable venture, aiming to earn some money while enjoying myself. I quickly prepared for the expedition, donning a warm jacket and tossing a bag into the car along with a sizable tarpaulin. Within 10 minutes, I merged with the bustling morning traffic, which showed no signs of slowing down despite it being a day off. Prior to leaving the city, I stopped at a gas station to ensure a full tank. Who could predict the availability of gasoline in the middle of nowhere? Continuing on, I traversed about 20 kilometers along the ring road, eventually reaching the Vitebsk highway that led through Lepel. It was a well-maintained road, allowing me to relax and take in the scenery. After covering 160 kilometers, I veered right, leaving the nature reserve behind on my left. The road gradually narrowed, necessitating a reduction in speed. The freezing temperatures had caused a light snowfall during the night, and now the snowflakes danced in every direction, creating mesmerizing waves in front of my car. The morning sun, veiled by a thin mist, accentuated the sharpness of the surrounding landscape. The autumn forest had shed most of its leaves, leaving only vibrant remnants that stood out against the backdrop of the gray-green foliage. I continued driving for about 30 kilometers until the asphalt abruptly ended, forcing me to transition onto a dirt road. Soon, dense forest engulfed me, enclosing the path ahead. As I ventured deeper, the road grew progressively narrower. Around a bend, I unexpectedly came across a small village with an unfamiliar name to my ears, Shalafeni. Quite an intriguing little settlement, I thought. According to the map, just beyond the village lay a medium-sized lake named Ok, equally unconventional in nomenclature. The local toponymy seemed distinct from the familiar Slavic names of Russian settlements, rivers, and lakes. Ok, Essa, Ella, Shalafeni. It felt as if I had traveled abroad, rather than being in my own homeland. Parking outside a store, I noticed two men huddled together near the entrance. Like all members of their kind, they appeared eager to find some alcoholic beverages, their gazes shifting between surprise and hope as they noticed my presence. I was well prepared for such excursions, dressed in camouflage attire and warm military boots with high ankle support. A tactical knife rested in its camouflage sheath on my belt, while sunglasses shielded my eyes. The deep scar on my left cheek added an extra touch of rugged charisma, which immediately captivated the attention of these curious men. "Hey man, spare me a couple of rubles, my stomach is burning," exclaimed one of the local vagabonds in a raspy tone, skipping the pleasantries as he approached me. Only someone with a heart of stone and a soul of stone could disregard such a plea. I, however, did not possess such callousness. Retrieving a few bills from my wallet, I handed them to the suffering man. "Are you from around here?" I inquired, hoping to strike up a conversation. As if the answer wasn't evident enough. "Yeah, from around these parts," replied the fellow, elongating his vowels. "What lies ahead?" I gestured toward the road leading into the forest. "Well, who knows?" The man scratched his head and added, "We don't venture that way." I understood that they would be of no assistance to me. Returning to my car, I glanced at the dashboard clock, which read 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Time had flown by swiftly. Switching on the radio, I began to drive slowly, my focus fixed on the road. Dense woods hemmed me in from all sides, and the farther I traveled, the more overgrown the surroundings became. Before long, the branches of roadside shrubs were scraping against the car's sides. Approaching a fork in the road, I pondered which way to turn. They say when you're uncertain, it's best to go left. So, without much thought, I veered left. The autumn twilight descended, compelling me to switch on my headlights. At yet another fork, I instinctively turned left once more, on autopilot. As I drove along the road, I couldn't help but notice that the forest seemed to be thinning. To the left and right, instead of lush greenery, there were fields and neglected vegetable gardens covered in lifeless grass. Dimly illuminated by my headlights, I could make out a few dilapidated houses emerging from the darkness. It appeared to be a village, although according to the map, there shouldn't have been any settlements within a 20-kilometer radius. Confusion filled my mind. How had I ended up here? Just as I was about to enter the village, my car's engine suddenly began hissing and then abruptly died. The silence that followed was deafening, as even the radio refused to emit a sound. Concerned about draining the battery, I turned off the headlights, grabbed a flashlight, buttoned up my jacket, and stepped out of the car. Surrounded by pitch darkness, I could barely make out the vague outlines of structures at the edge of my vision. They weren't quite houses or barns, but something in between. The eerie stillness enveloped the air, devoid of any signs of life. No barking dogs, no conversations, none of the usual sounds one would expect in a lively village during the evening. Not a single window displayed a glimmer of light. I glanced at my phone, only to confirm what I already suspected. The network was non-existent. Just my luck, I thought sarcastically. Everything seemed dead. Locking my car, I ventured forth along the weed-infested street, cautiously shining my flashlight on the path before me. The village was diminutive, consisting of no more than 10 or 15 huts. Their roofs, either blackened, sloping, or collapsed, formed dark silhouettes on both sides, with broken windows resembling black holes. Somewhere off to the side, a small river or stream murmured softly. As I made my way through the majority of the village, my attention was suddenly drawn to a light emanating from the last house on the outskirts. Curiosity compelled me to investigate, and as I drew nearer, I caught sight of the faint glow of a kerosene lamp flickering in a surviving window. There was no fence surrounding the property, so I approached the door directly. Without warning, it swung open as if someone had been eagerly anticipating my arrival. "Come in quickly, don't let the cold in," a husky voice called out to me. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the interior of the house. In the dim light, I noticed an elderly man seated by the stove, busily adding logs to the crackling fire. Motioning for me to sit in an old armchair across from him, he said, "Don't dawdle, take a seat. Would you like some tea?" I nodded appreciatively, and the man walked over to the table, pouring a thick, steaming cup of tea from an aluminum kettle into a worn porcelain cup. With a blend of herbs and spirits, he offered, handing me a brimming mug. "I am Petrikov Joseph Kazimirovich, but you can just call me Grandpa Petrak." I took a sip of the drink, feeling its slight sweetness and tang pleasantly warm my throat and belly. "I have some food in the car. Maybe I should go and get it," I suggested. "Don't bother, we've had enough tea," the old man replied, using the poker to settle the firewood. A shower of sparks danced up towards the vaulted ceiling of the fireplace. A sense of coziness enveloped me, as if I had lived in this house for half my life. With each sip of tea, my fatigue melted away, and my worries dissipated. Everything around me became familiar and comforting. "Are you feeling warm now?" the old man asked, taking a seat on a stool opposite me. "Winter is approaching, and it's going to be very cold soon. The roads will be snowed in, and I won't be able to pass through." His deep voice lulled me into a peaceful state, while at the same time invoking a sense of tranquility. Suddenly, I felt compelled to confide in this stranger about my life, my troubles, and the betrayals I had experienced from my mother and wife. We sat together for a long time. I spoke, and he listened attentively. Sometimes he nodded with understanding or hummed softly, stroking his gray beard. I poured out everything about the war, my father, my mother, my wife, and children. When I finished, we remained in silence for a while. Then he refilled my tea and took the first sip from his own mug. "You've been through a lot, my child," he remarked. "All your life, you've been chasing happiness, not realizing that it's right there within reach. They loved you and still love you. You just don't see it. You're so consumed by your resentments, hiding away like a badger in its burrow, with only your nose poking out." He took another sip from his mug, his words drifting from a distant place. "Look around you, and you'll find your happiness. And be kinder to people, especially those around you. Remember, a person's strength lies not in their fists, but in forgiveness. Learn to forgive. And remember, if one door closes, search for another and fearlessly open it." His words echoed as if from afar. My eyes grew heavy, and I drifted off to sleep, unnoticed. I awoke to the sound of the radio, finding myself seated in the car with my head resting against the window. A chill had gripped my back and legs, and a sense of confusion lingered. Had it all been a dream? The image of Grandpa Patron, the aroma of his tea, and our heartfelt conversation played vividly in my mind. Each word he spoke resonated within me, and the taste of his tea still lingered on my palate. But how did I end up in the car? The question remained unanswered, perplexing my thoughts. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine purred softly, emitting a tranquil hum. The car glided slowly down the overgrown street as I scanned my surroundings, hoping to spot the house where I had shared such meaningful moments with Grandpa Patron. However, all I could see were dilapidated huts, marred by time and the elements. Reaching the end of the street, I found myself at the last house. It bore some resemblance to the one in my dream, devoid of a fence. I approached the worn-out hut, its porch collapsed and its door unhinged. It became clear to me then that it had all been a figment of my imagination. Exhaustion, worries, and the burdens of past days must have played tricks on my mind. Prepared to leave, I noticed a glimpse of yellowed fabric protruding from the gaps between the planks. Curiosity compelled me to investigate further, and as I carefully pulled on it, a bundle emerged. Unwrapping the cloth, I discovered an ancient ring in my palm, tarnished with time, along with an enigmatic signet ring of unfamiliar metal. The signet bore an unknown monogram, reminiscent of a bygone era when such rings were used to seal important letters or messages. It was a captivating find, but its origin remained a mystery. I tucked the ring into one of my jacket pockets, deciding to ponder its significance later. Pressing down on the gas pedal, the car surged forward, traversing the frozen road. The day had already begun to break, casting its light upon the landscape. Soon, I spotted an old, deserted cemetery not far from the roadside. Crooked crosses and weathered tombstones adorned the typical village graveyard. I disembarked from the car, venturing only along its periphery. Amongst the graves, one stood out, slightly secluded from the rest. It featured a metal pyramid crowned by a faded red star, and its inscription was clearly legible. Petrakov Iosif Kazimirovich, born in 1880, executed by fascists on 11/16/1943. As darkness enveloped the surroundings, I finally arrived home. Remaining seated in the car, I attempted to unravel the bewildering events that had transpired during my journey, while also trying to shake off the weariness that had accumulated within me. Suddenly, my thoughts drifted to the ring. I gazed at it intently for a prolonged moment, and then, driven by an inexplicable impulse, slid it onto the ring finger of my right hand, where my wedding band once resided. Instantly, it felt as though I had plunged into an unfathomable abyss, enveloped by a profound unknown. The morning started like any other. While I was shaving, Diane had already managed to prepare coffee and toast. As she bustled around, she updated me on the unfortunate situation of my friend Inna, who had been abandoned by yet another husband. I had honestly lost track at this point. Diane also mentioned that she would be home early today because my mother had called, promising to pay us a visit. She kindly offered to pick up the kids from school herself. Though Diane spoke to me, my mind was preoccupied with my own concerns. I had a hectic day ahead with 2 crucial meetings scheduled with potential clients that could significantly transform my business for the better. I spritzed some cologne on myself, making sure my worn ring on my right hand was properly adjusted, and made my way to the kitchen. "Deanne, are you even listening?" She tapped my coffee cup with a spoon, hoping to grab my attention. "Of course, honey," I replied with a smile. "You mentioned my mother's visit, and you'll be home early today." "Exactly," she said, looking at me intently. "So, on your way back, could you please get a cake and some champagne?" I nodded, understanding her request. I approached Diane, embraced her, and planted a tender kiss on her lips. "You have all the time in the world," she grumbled playfully, reciprocating the kiss. Looking into my eyes, she caressed my cheek with her warm fingers.